Hello, my name is Mike Paestella. I'm the Assistant Director of Campus Life for Student Involvement. And thank you for attending this presentation on the 5 practices of leadership as explained in the SLPI. What is leadership? Let's take a moment to think about, what does this word mean to you? You may want to take a moment to pause the presentation to think about, what does this word mean to your organization? Leadership has meant a lot of things. We're going to look at the evolution and history of the concept of leadership briefly in this presentation. After we've done that, we're going to move into looking at the 5 practices of leadership as Kouzes Posner put in the Leadership Challenge. Your organization then can look at how you as individual leaders and participants in the leadership process can get involved in bringing these 5 practices to life for each of you and as a collective with your organization. Now for that historical approach. There are many approaches listed throughout the years. Some of these are noted in the great work of Susan Komaviz and her team at the National Collegiate Leadership Center at the University of Maryland. From the Great Man approach, going into traits, behaviors, situational, and charismatic. There are aspects of each of these approaches that have meaning and can be found in modern ways of looking at management and sometimes even leadership. However, they all had flaws which prevented them from being the final step in looking at what we think of leadership. From Great Man, which was inherently sexist and really based on the king's eldest son, to traits. And while there might be traits that can help you as a participant or leader in leadership, who's to say what a set list is? And isn't it just as important for participants to have it as the leaders? Similar type ideology towards behaviors. And then while situations can dictate how we respond, situational leadership, again, kind of left things wide open. Charisma can be a key theme or talent that can be used by a leader or a participant, but not necessarily a leadership style. What I would encourage you to think more about would be reciprocal theories on leadership. Focus on the reciprocal nature of the leader-follower interactions. Emphasize collective goals rather than the leader's goals. So it's not about a president. It's not about a CEO. It's not about the manager of the store. It's really about that leader-follower or leader-participant or leader-collaborator interactions. And reciprocal theories really elevate the importance of the role of followers in the leadership process. If you're not comfortable with the word followers, use participants, collaborators, what have you. But it's starting to show you that we're thinking about this differently. Directions, approach, who's involved, where it goes that way. Styles of reciprocal leadership. There's servant leadership, transforming, complexity, adaptive, and shared. So again, leadership continues to grow. It continues to evolve, and we continue to look at it in different ways. However, this is a huge paradigm shift in thinking of servant leadership and transforming leadership and where those go into being adaptive and shared than that first list. Because in servant leadership, you could think of that the president or the CEO, which we often might see as the top person on a pyramid in a leadership scale, is now at the bottom. We invert that pyramid. So if it were president, exec board, committee chairs, members, going from the tip of that pyramid down to the base, now think of it the other way, where the president is on the bottom supporting all of the rest, versus the rest doing the will of the president. So the more responsibility, the more of a servant you become. Transforming leadership, something we see with social justice movements, something we see where something really dramatically changes, often through challenges and challenging the process and how that works out, but not transactional, transforming, where there is this higher, greater good that comes out of it. These can be complex theories, and they can create a need to adapt. One way we see that is by presentations like this being done online, so that you can enjoy this in your student organization or as an individual versus this meeting, say, in MCC 133. And a key thing with reciprocal leadership is that relationship, which makes it shared. So a director, a manager, an officer, yes, they have a title and they have responsibility. And once upon a time, that might have been a definition of leadership. But now they're engaged in this relationship with you, and you're engaged in this relationship with them. So the new member to the organization really could have a huge impact with a great idea or with resources or knowledge on how to bring something to life. They don't need to wait till they're president of the organization to do that, and how they work together. Which brings us to the Student Leadership Practices Inventory, which is a personality inventory, which you can take. And if you're interested in learning more about that, I'm happy to share a webpage with you. Feel free to email me after you've viewed this, and I can share greater information about that process. In the SLPI, it introduces you to 5 practices you can use in leadership. And I think these 5 practices are important for everybody. So it doesn't matter if you're that president, the committee chair, or the first semester student and working on things together that way. What they do to help you determine what you are more suited to using in your daily work now in regards to these 5 practices are what's called the 30 behaviors. And you'll be asked 30 questions. Depending on how you respond in those 30 questions, it will show you which of the 5 practices you're more prevalent to utilize as a leader or a participant in the leadership process. And those are model the way, inspire a shared vision, challenge the process, enable others to act, and encourage the heart. And we're going to look at those 5 practices now, what those mean, and how you might be able to apply those. So model away, the first of the 5 practices. And with that first of the 5 practices, there are also what are called 2 commitments. And the 2 commitments, there will be 2 different commitments found with each of the 5 practices. So you can kind of see that there's 5 practices, 10 commitments, 30 behaviors that way. So for modeling the way, we're looking at clarify values by finding your voice and affirming shared values. Set the example by aligning actions with shared values. And when you think about that, under the idea and practice of model the way, that really gets me thinking about influence. So one of the things you might want to think about now, you might want to pause the presentation for a bit, is to think about who's influenced you. Maybe a parent, maybe a teacher, maybe an older student leader, maybe a community member, maybe a sibling. Who's influenced you? How did they model the way? How did they help you identify your values? Part of what you want to think about this in regards to your student organization or your team is, how do we align that? How do our organizational values parallel and live congruently with the values of our members? How are we making sure that those are shared and that we're affirming them the right way? And a lot of that has to do with knowing your purpose and your mission and seeing how those play out together. When we think about that, it brings us to the second of the 5 practices, inspire a shared vision. Envision the future by imagining exciting and ennobling possibilities, and list others in a common vision by appealing to shared aspirations. Let's think about that. If we're modeling the way, we're thinking about who influences us and we're influencing others that way. Part of what that influence should be leading to is inspiring that shared vision. So if I join an organization, if I'm part of a community group, if I'm helping out a philanthropic event, it is because I'm inspired by their vision. So their vision is where they aspire to be, where they're going based off of their mission. So something to maybe pause and think about is, as an organization, as a residence hall, as a community group, how are you sharing your mission? And how are you letting people know what your vision is? Now, as you think about that, how is that then inspiring them to join you and become active and see what they can do to be part of your program that way? Because if you're not accurately sharing what your mission and vision are, if you're not then programming to your organizational values, it's going to be hard for people to buy in. It's going to be hard for people to want to stay engaged and active. That's why it's very important while you're modeling the way to really inspire this vision. This is what we do in the Geology Club. This is how it makes us better professionals. This is how it enhances our learning. This is how we have a lot of fun on some of the field trips that we do. So thinking about different things like that. This is why you have the sport. This is why you have this social justice initiative. This is why we have this programming body. Things to think about. So feel free again to pause and think about, how are we sharing our mission? How are we inspiring people to help us get to that vision of where we can be next? Leads us to challenge the process. And this can be a really fun one that way, as far as thinking about search for opportunities by seizing the initiative and looking outward for innovative ways to improve. Experiment and take risks by constantly generating small wins and learning from that experience. That's a big one. Small wins are a big one, especially during challenging times. And these are challenging times. So for your organization, for you as a student leader, you have to think about the metrics of what you're currently working on, as far as how many programs to do, who to target those programs to, how to determine attendance at that program, where things play out, what that impact will be. How does reach play into this? Because the metrics of the past don't apply to the current setting that we're in. So it's time to determine our own things. In a few different ways that can be done. One fun one, which I think can easily be done, even in Zoom with your officers and then your members, is to challenge the process with a simple tool. And this simple tool is a paperclip. So think about this. What can one do with a paperclip, and how can it help your organization challenge the process? This simple paperclip that could hold together a PowerPoint presentation, say. That'd be one use for it. But think about if you went into a student meeting, asked everyone there to get a sheet of paper, writing utensil, and then you held up a paperclip. Or if you had them, you gave everybody a paperclip and said, bring it to the meeting, or take out a paperclip from your desk if you're doing this in Zoom. And you think about that paperclip, and then quickly on your phone, give them 30 or 60 seconds, your choice, and say, write out everything you can do with a paperclip. And I'm not going to wait the 30 or 60 seconds. So if you're doing this live with the presentation, feel free to pause things. Then have people share. Who got 5 things? Who got 6 things? Who got 3 things? What maybe was the most creative? Have people share their lists. And it's okay if there's a lot of repetition. That's fine. But have them share to get that brainstorming out there. Then hold up the paperclip again, reset your phone, and give them 1 more minute to think of a new list, an extended list. Now that's okay if I offered something and you're like, oh, well, that's in my mind. So write it down. It's fine that it was already said. But what could happen here is there could be a lot of 3rd generation things that happen. I had an idea I wrote on my list. Juan had something he wrote on his list. Abby had something she wrote on her list. We share these out. And now it made me think of at least 2 other things that weren't on my list before. Then have people share again. Even if for a couple people, maybe they just wrote down other ideas they heard the first time, everyone's list got longer. And then look at those new things that came out of it that weren't shared the first time. Because if you challenge the process with your organization like that, it's going to give you a chance to review those metrics. It's going to give you a chance to think about, how do we do this program this way this year? How do we put this on hold? How do we create this new thing we could have never thought about creating before, but now that we're meeting in Zoom, we can. So challenging the process is very important. It also allows you to shatter a paradigm that holds people back in thinking that, but we've always done it this way. And one day when you get a chance to visit my office, you'll see that I have a pin in my office that says, but we've always done it this way, and it has the universal not sign through it. So something to think about as well. So this leads us to enabling others to act. The 2 commitments for that: foster collaboration by building trust and facilitating relationships, strengthen others by increasing self-determination and developing competence. So, to enable and to empower, particularly in a student organization setting, is to sustain and to move forward. The reality is, when someone joins an organization, they're not joining it for a 20 to 30-year career. They're joining it for 1 to maybe 3, maybe 4 years, depending when they join the organization. And maybe they'll move through those ranks and be a member involved in a committee, and then a committee chair, and then an officer, and who knows, maybe the president or treasurer. Maybe they'll just stay a member. Maybe they like being a committee chair and want to work on a certain project each year. But enabling others to act moves the organization forward. And when you think about this, this is a great reflection of the reciprocal leadership we looked at earlier. If the president and 3 or 4 officers are doing everything for an organization, and they all happen to be seniors and graduate, that organization is going to fall apart the next year. But what are they doing to delegate? What are they doing to train? What are they doing to create sustainability and have the next core group of officers ready to go? That's what's key. And that's something really to think about. How, as soon as you're in your role, are you training others? Are you enabling others? Are you delegating to others so that they're ready to go? They're ready to act. So in the event that you're sick and can't be there for 2 weeks, so in the event that you take an internship that you had a great opportunity to do the next semester and weren't expecting, and then you're not there, and yes, maybe you have access to email, but it's still not the same thing, they're ready to go because there's constant turnover in your organization, in your residence hall, on your sport club. Constant turnover. So if you're enabling others to act, if you're delegating, if you're sharing the responsibility, like shared leadership that we looked at earlier, this is going to make you a lot more successful moving forward. It's going to prevent your officers from burning out, and your newer members who are just joining the organization are going to feel inspired. They're going to see that they're working on that vision because you're modeling something for them, and then they'll enable the next core group of officers to move forward and act. This brings us to the 5th practice. Encourage the heart. And the commitments for encouraging the heart are recognize contributions by showing appreciation for individual excellence, celebrate the values and victories by creating a spirit of community. All too often in organizations, and it doesn't matter if it's a community group, if it's a student organization, if it's a workforce team, or at the restaurant you work in, the theater you work in, the residence hall you work in, we do this great program. We have this great event. We handle this big rush or holiday season. And then we just go into the next thing. And we don't take time to celebrate and appreciate the individuals and the collective It's key to think about this from two different perspectives that way, because it's not just about the individual. But how do we look at that with the individual? How do we look at saying, hey, you were the member of the week? Or maybe like a thank you member thing at the end of business meetings where people can share their thoughts and appreciation of, Jordan, you really helped me out during the week as I was working on this project, and you weren't even part of the committee and you came in and made a difference. I wanted to thank you for that. What if that's added to an agenda, this time to do thank you members at the end of a meeting? Could be pretty cool, the feeling that it would give. Nice warm way to end meetings that way, something that's easy to still do in Zoom or that you could do in person. Celebrating as a group, taking the time to look at that milestone and say, we achieved this. We made this happen. Maybe it's hosting a speaker. Maybe it's doing that first philanthropic event online. Maybe it's running your whole new member program online for the first time ever. Maybe it's sustaining the interest in your sport club because you lost this season, but you got to keep a core group ready for the next season to step up and be ready to play when the time allows. How do you encourage? Now, something I want you to think about as individuals at this point is big part of encouraging the heart is showing appreciation, showing thank you. So maybe you think about that person that modeled the way for you. Maybe you think of that person that inspired a vision and that led to you getting involved in a group and working on its mission. Maybe it's someone who enabled you. Maybe it's someone who challenged you in a process you were part of. And because you got challenged, you got better because you thought wider and bigger about things. Think about that person for a moment. Feel free to pause the video if you'd like. Now, what I'd like you to do in the next day, regardless of when you're viewing this, is reach out to that person. Or if it's not practical in that time period to reach out to that person, put it on your to-do list to reach out to that person. Use your phone as a phone. Don't text the person. Call them. Maybe text them to say, hey, when's a good time for me to call you? Show your appreciation. Thank them. Maybe it's something that you can do over semester break and that person's in your hometown and you're going to be able to see them. So you make the commitment now to see them. Maybe it means setting up a Zoom with somebody and saying, you know what, I got to talk to you about something. Can we set up the Zoom? And then thanking them that way, which is even better than a phone call, if that works out for you. But take the time to encourage the heart of someone who's encouraged you or enabled you or challenged you or inspired you or modeled the way for you. So now we've taken some time to look at all 5 of these practices. And my question to you as an individual or as an organization watching this is to think about how we utilize the 5 practices to bring your organization's mission and purpose to life. So you can feel free to pause the video for a bit and have that group discussion, or think about it yourself, partially reflective. Where have we been? What have we done? And then forward thinking, where are we going to go from here? And this is something you could even share with your members in regards to having them think about, hey, we've watched this video. We've thought about some of these things Mike shared about. Now, before the next meeting, think about model the way. Think about inspire a shared vision, challenge the process, enable others to act and encourage the heart. Think about the role that you can play with that. Think about what you bring to the table with strength. And then see where that goes into the big group. And think about the roles that you can play with these 5 practices in your different organizations, because how you act in your sorority might be different than how you act in a musical group, or a multicultural organization, or an academic group, or helping youth sports, or being the TA for a class, or in your roles in RM and Johnson. A lot of different ways to think about that. I would like to thank you for viewing this, the modern version of attending. Once again, my name is Mike Paestella. I'm the Assistant Director of Campus Life for Student Involvement, and that's my email, michael.paestella@oswego.edu. You're more than welcome to email me, set up a time where we can Zoom and talk about the 5 practices. If you would like me to present this live to your student organization or your exec board, I'm happy to do that as well. Feel free to send me an email. We'll set up a time and talk about how we'll approach that and how we can personalize it to your organization and your mission and vision that way. I want to briefly share about some of the resources. Kouzes Posner, who developed the Student Leadership Practices Inventory and the Leadership Challenge books. Some of the other information that came from Susan Kouzes and her team for exploring leadership of college students. So some great resources and guides for you in that perspective as well. So once again, thank you for attending. Thank you for being open to reaching out and learning more about the 5 practices, the 10 commitments, and maybe one day taking the SLPI and experiencing the 30 behaviors as well.